Hello, BMIS families. Um, this is Miss Omika. Um, I know most of you have not seen my face ever, but I wanted to record the parent workshop that we did on Wednesday for those of you who couldn't come. And it is talking about managing your child's behavior at home. So, I wanted to recognize that this is the third school year that we have been dealing with COVID, and we're seeing that children are still having some trouble kind of coping with the uncertainty and with kind of the back and forth with the changes in the COVID guidelines, with different things that are still happening. And what is common that the students are coming to school and they're holding it together, and then when they go home, then they're just really falling apart. And so I wanted to offer this workshop to those of you who are experiencing some challenges at home with your children, whether it is um, just having a lot of big emotions, or just really even simply getting them to, put their shoes on in the morning. So, what we're going to be talking about really briefly is really understanding challenging behaviors, what they are, the ABCs of managing behaviors, what antecedents are, what consequences are, and then just really kind of responding to challenging behaviors and what holding space is. So, why do children misbehave? In the meeting, a lot of parents showed, um, gave some examples and insights about why they think so. And a lot of what they said is really kind of listed here. Move that out of the way. There we go. Um, sometimes they're tired, they're hungry, they're overstimulated, they're understimulated, they are exhausted, they need a drink of water, sometimes they need to poop, they need some physical contact, they need a hug, they need to, play with someone, they need attention. Sometimes they are just really bored and haven't figured out how to cope with that. Sometimes they can be too hot or too cold. Children have a hard time regulating their system. They're like little lizards. um, we don't fully prepare them for transitions. Ooh, I can't talk right now. um, we don't really have a lot of consistency in scheduling. Things are always changing for them. Sometimes we're giving them too many choices. We're giving them too much language that isn't developmentally appropriate. Sometimes they have had too much screen time and they're just kind of zonked out. Sometimes they need a nap, and sometimes it's really just a day that ends with why. In other words, I don't really know sometimes why some of these behaviors are happening. So, in understanding behaviors, our children's behavior is really how they've learned to communicate. So, the example that I give sometimes is, imagine that you are in a foreign country and you don't speak the language and you desperately need to go to the bathroom. And you ask one person where the toilet is and they tell you what time it is. And you ask another person where the toilet is and they give you a cookie. And so eventually you're going to get frustrated. You're going to start yelling and screaming and behaving in this way, that you feel will get others to understand what it is you need. But for them, they're like, what is wrong with this person? Um, that's how it is to be a kid, especially a toddler, or, even a 5-year old that's really kind of learning how to express themselves and how to express their needs. Um, when they don't feel heard or understood, they're going to get really, really frustrated. And that's when we start seeing the tantruming or the acting out, or even just saying no and trying to kind of grasp onto some of that independence. Um, when children engage in behaviors that we see as bad or undesirable, they're usually either trying to gain something or to avoid something. And so it's really our job to kind of understand what need is trying to be met. And also, how we view and understand our child's behaviors really sets the stage of how we respond to it and how we respond to them. That if we see it as inconvenient or annoying, then it really kind of guides how we respond to it. Um, we really need to learn how to define behaviors. If we define them as acting up or being, being good, um, it really is ambiguous and we're not really clear on the behavior that we're trying to change. So, a well defined behavior would be, when I ask them to put their shoes on, they run around the room, or it's an unexpected behavior. Or when, they come home from school, they start their homework on time. That is an expected behavior. We want to try to avoid using good or bad as descriptors for behavior. So we use undesired or unexpected instead of, a bad behavior. So, in managing behaviors, what we're doing is really observing and looking at what the antecedent was. So, that list of why, explanations for challenging behaviors, those are kind of the antecedents. Is the child hungry? Did they sleep well last night? Are they too hot or cold? Are we moving too much? Are we transitioning too much? Is the activity that I'm trying to get them to engage in, is that be around the time that they usually take a nap? We want to look at what happened before, what is kind of the setting event. Um, the behavior, again, what is actually happening in this moment, and then also the consequences. So it's not necessarily the punishment that we're giving them, but it's really what happens immediately after. So if my child throws a tantrum, am I giving them, a device to appease them so they be quiet? If I'm frustrated and, they are being what we think is attention seeking, do I start yelling at them? Or if they're taking too long to get dressed, do I raise my voice? Do you send them to their room because, it's really not the time you're trying to get work done? How are we responding to the behavior? So that's really kind of the consequence. What are we doing to either encourage or diminish this behavior? So, antecedents, there are a lot of different ways and they come in many forms. Some of the antecedents, they prop up that behavior, they encourage the behavior that we want, and others are designed to kind of help keep behaviors from happening. So, antecedents can be a lot of different things. Things we want to try is we want to see if we can be aware of the situation at the present moment. So making sure that our kids are, we have snacks. Any parent of a toddler will tell you there's always snacks, there's always things to entertain them in our bags at all times. We want to be aware of our emotions and our body language. We want to make sure that we are staying calm and centering ourselves when there is a problematic behavior. We're taking care of ourselves so that if there is something that is unexpected that happens, then we're making sure that we are taken care of so that we can respond to it in a really peaceful and kind way. We adjust the environment as much as possible. So making sure that, when we're traveling, we have snacks and things like that for them to anticipate their needs. If we ask them to do something, we're making the expectations clear and we're providing countdown for, transitions, making sure that they know we're shifting from one behavior, from one activity to another, and making sure that they are really aware that it's happening instead of just kind of, okay, now let's get ready for bed. um, Kids really love to be invested in what's happening in their lives, even though sometimes it seems that they are very disinterested. We want to make sure that they have a choice. So some parents are like, my kid doesn't have a choice in things sometimes. So the example that I gave is that my son at one point was really attached to his superhero t-shirts. So really loved to wear them, Spider-Man and Superman and Hulk and all of those. Um, and when it became cold in the wintertime, it created a challenge when I was getting him ready for school. And so the choice that I gave him is that, you can wear your Hulk t-shirt today, but do you want to wear a black shirt underneath or do you want to wear a green shirt underneath? Um, the Hulk, the long sleeve shirt was the non-negotiable, but he got to make a choice in which shirt he wanted to wear. And so he felt like he still had a choice. And I wasn't telling him, no, you can't wear your Hulk shirt. So situations we want to try to avoid is assuming that our kids know what we mean, assuming our kids know what our expectations are. Our expectation may be that every morning they get up and they get, going and all of that. And depending on the age of your child, they may know, but sometimes they need a reminder. They may forget. Um, Calling things out from a distance, calling instructions or things like that from a distance. We want to make sure that our kids have our attention, or we have their attention rather, and that they are listening to us. And so if they are across the room and they are reading a book or playing with a toy, they're not really listening to what we're saying. And that can kind of make us frustrated and lead to, some challenging situations. Transitioning our kids without warning. I tell teachers all the time they need a song or they need, a countdown, they need a timer to really prepare kids from transitioning from one activity to another, transitioning to tidy up time. They really just need that reinforcement. Giving multi step instructions. So, for most of our kids and most of us who have young children, it really is challenging for them to follow multi step instructions. We have to really give them one or two steps at a time. And generally, around 5 or 6 is when they're able to really kind of do that, to follow multiple steps. And so we want to make sure that they understand what it is that we're asking them to do, but then saying, okay, can you take this shirt and put it in the hamper? And so that's two instructions right there. And so we want to make sure that we're limiting that, instead of, can you take the shirt and put it over there? And when you're done, can you pick up your shoes? And when you're done, can you pick up your toys? That's kind of a lot. And also asking rapid fire questions. And this happens really when um, we are questioning our kids about why they did something. And so asking them, why did you do that? Why did you hurt them? Why did you touch that thing? Or why did you do the thing that I asked you not to do? That's too much processing. And that can really happen at any age. That I find that there are some year 6 students that really need some time to respond to a question before I start asking them another one. So, what we want to do is create positive outcomes. So, not all consequences are created equal. Some are a really great way to give our kids some structure and help them learn kind of the difference between expected and unexpected, or acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. Um, and we want to make sure that we are the consequences that we give them are creating these positive experiences for them and creating the potential for these positive or expected behaviors that we would like to see. So, what we want to try when a behavior happens and that it is the consequences that we give in certain behaviors, we want to try to give positive attention for positive behaviors. So, actively ignoring them until they do the thing that we want them to do. And ignoring actively isn't walking out of the room or not speaking to them at all. So if they are tantruming or crying about something, and we're like, listen, um, you are totally entitled to have your feelings and you're totally entitled to be frustrated with the situation, but I can't talk to you right now while you're crying or while you're yelling at me. So I'm going to be here. And when you're done, take some deep breaths, calm down. When you're done, then we can talk. And so that's giving that positive attention. So your child self regulates and calms themselves down. You're giving them that positive attention for calming down by themselves. So you're not leaving them in the room. Sometimes that tantrum is a bit much and you may need to, but ignoring actively is really just communicating with them and saying, mommy's going to go get some water. I'll be right back. I'm right here, but I need to go get some water. Just so you can take a break from that really big feeling that they're experiencing. Reward menus help sometimes. For my son, they did not. But, it really helps sometimes for the kids to um, kind of have a choice. Again, have a choice in what it is that we are asking of them and what it is that we are um, giving them that choice in what the consequence is and what that reward is. And so, okay, after you clean your room, would you like to get a snack or would you like to, watch a video together? And so, giving them that choice. You want to be clear and you want to be consistent. So, the rules don't change daily or according to how you feel in that moment. We want to make sure that we're setting rules and we're following them. So, if we say that, um, no phones at the table, then we got to put ours down. Or if we say that when we get home, we're all going to read, it's really important not to read a book on our phone or our devices, because our children will say, well, you're playing with your device, so why can't I play with mine? And we want to make sure that after we correct the behavior, we return to the task. So if our child is throwing a tantrum in the middle of the park, we don't leave the park. We kind of manage the situation and say, okay, we can go back to what it is that we were doing. Can I move that? Okay, there we go. We want to avoid giving negative attention. So again, giving them the device or if they're throwing a tantrum, giving them a cookie or giving them a device to kind of, shut them up because it's inconvenient or it's embarrassing because we're in public. But we want to really kind of stand firm and consistent in how we respond to situations. Giving delayed consequences. This is a big one. So most of our kids have really short attention spans. And so if we are saying, if our kid does something, they hit their sibling, it's not wise to give that consequence 6 hours later. So saying, okay, we're going to deal with this later. How many times have we said, okay, we're going to talk about this when your father gets home? That's a delayed consequence. And so consequences, any consequence, positive or negative, needs to be immediate and appropriate. Giving proportionate, I can't talk today, giving disproportionate consequences. So, taking a device away for, abusing the device or not doing their homework, that's appropriate. But punishing them for a week because, they told a lie, that's really not appropriate. And then, giving positive consequences to negative things. So again, giving the device when they're tantruming or, allowing them to go out for ice cream when they didn't do their homework. So we want to respond to challenging behaviors. So ways that we can um, positively respond to challenging behaviors is there is a quote by Viktor Frankl, and I use it a lot of times in when I'm talking about how we respond to children as adults. So the quote is, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies our power to choose. And in our response, or power to choose our response, excuse me. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. And so, what I say, what I tell kids, what I tell teachers is that any response that you make to something that is challenging or something that is upsetting or frustrating, or just generates some sort of emotions inside of you is um, anything that you do is on the other side of 3 deep breaths. And so, um, with my child, when he was younger, he had some really big feelings. And before I respond to that, I really take, 3 deep breaths. And now he's at the point where um, he really kind of knows that if I am getting frustrated with something that he's doing, I'm taking a really big, deep sigh. And he's like, oh, okay. Um, there's also this idea of mirror neurons that our nervous systems really kind of interact with others. So, have you ever walked into a space or interacted with somebody who was in a really bad mood, and then you start feeling yourself being, like, wait a minute, what's going on with me? That's mirror neurons, and so our kids respond to how we're feeling or how we're doing in that moment. So, if I'm frustrated or I'm irritable, our kids are going to notice that, and they're going to start responding. Um, The last thing is really reminding yourself that I am responding with love. So my really good friend, um, he posted something on social media about, the way that he responds to his child. He has a very strong-willed, opinionated, very courageous and brave and amazing daughter. But she has these really big feelings and she, demands justice. And when he's responding to that, especially things that are really challenging for them to get through, he reminds himself that love lives here and compassion lives here. And this is how I'm going to choose to respond to my child, no matter how I'm feeling. We talked about holding space for your child. And so holding space means being really present and remaining invisible. So your child can experience that really big feeling, and you are there and you're aware of it and you're accepting it, and you are controlling yourself to try and not fix it. So you're allowing that space for your child to manage their own feelings and manage things on their own, and then return to us or return to the situation when they're able. And sometimes that is sitting there while they're crying and not trying to console them and not trying to calm them down because it's inconvenient or it's uncomfortable for us, but really holding that space for them to really have those feelings and have those emotions. Um, I want to go back to actively ignoring a bit, where we talked about um, being there and making sure that our child is safe, but we're not engaging with them until um, they are ready to kind of respond in a way. So, not ready to respond in a way, but ready to engage with us that will facilitate some positive dialogue and a way that we can kind of move towards a positive consequence. And so the example that I gave in the meeting was that when my son was about two or so, 2 or 3, I was going to the bakery. I was on my way to a friend's birthday party, and I was tasked with picking up the birthday cake for him. And um, I wasn't told the name on the cake. I mean, the name the order was under, but I was told that it was a red velvet cake that said "Happy Birthday, Kevin." And so when we walk into the bakery, my son sees a cookie and he wants the cookie. And I'm like, okay, we'll get the cookie after we get the cake. Let me get the cake first, okay? And it was taking too long to get the cake because they would not give me the cake unless I could tell them the name on the order. And so it was causing a lot of frustration for me. My son was tantruming because we were taking too long to give him the cookie. And so eventually, and I mean, he's a full on meltdown, oh, on the floor, everything. And so um, pretty soon someone comes out the back and, he's like asking people, "Is this your child? Is this your child?" And I turn around and I'm like, "He's mine." And he's like, "Well, he needs to get off the floor. He's really upset." And I'm like, "Yeah." And I will give him the cookie or I'll engage with him when he stops crying. He knows how to do it. He's fine. "Well, the floor is dirty and he needs to get off that floor." And I said, "Well, he can walk. He's choosing to be on the floor. If I can get this cake quickly, then I can get the cookie for my son and then we can get out of here." And so it created a really frustrating and embarrassing situation for me. But I reminded myself, now I'm not going to pretend that I was totally calm in that situation. I'm not going to pretend that I, held it together and didn't get frustrated and didn't get upset. But in that moment, I really kind of doubled down on actively ignoring him, letting him know that I was here and I was ready. But um, I didn't give in and I didn't say, "Hey, you guys, can we just get the cookie so my child will be quiet?" I think he didn't get the cookie in that day because it just was no space for him to calm down. But he did get rewarded with the cake that I eventually got. Or not rewarded, but he did eventually get a sweet, which was what he wanted in the beginning. But I say all that to say, and I like to give examples because sometimes, as the counselor, and sometimes as being seen as the expert in these things, that we sometimes forget that, or even myself, I forget that, I'm a parent too. And so I know about these things and I can offer solutions for parents that are, yes, sometimes research based and, based on people who have done loads of studies and proven that these things work, but also things that I have tried in my own parenting and failed at in my own parenting and learned from. And so, really kind of understanding what works for my son and works for, my nieces and nephews, and even just the students that I've worked with throughout the years, what is working. And so, really kind of trying to offer suggestions and interventions that you can do at home. Um, and so that was really what we did in the last kind of few minutes of the session. And so if you need anything, please reach out to me. If you need any suggestions, or you're kind of having some difficulty with a certain behavior in the home, then please, I'm here. I'm happy to help. And so, um, yeah, the children are coming in this morning. But yeah, I am really excited to continue these workshops. The workshop was really fun on Wednesday, and I hope that we can continue that and keep offering things that are useful for you. So, if you have any suggestions of future workshops that you'd like to see, please reach out to us and let us know. But this is the end of the presentation. I hope that you guys have a good day, and that you have a good weekend. So, bye.